James fell face first into the dust. John shouted his name and dropped beside him instantly, gripping his shoulders, shaking him hard like strength alone could pull breath back into his chest. James's mouth opened, but only a weak sound escaped. His eyes rolled, unfocused, desperate. "James, breathe," John begged. "Please, just breathe." James's fingers tightened around John's wrist. His grip was weak, but deliberate. He pulled John closer, their foreheads almost touching. "Listen to me," James whispered, every word scraping his throat like glass. John's tears fell freely now. "No, don't talk. Save your strength." James shook his head slightly. "There's no strength left." The wind carried dust around them, settling on James's skin, mixing with sweat and blood. The man who had promised wealth stood a few steps away, silent, watching, waiting. James coughed, his body jerking. This is the breath," he said faintly. "Only one of us was meant to leave here alive." John turned his head toward the stranger, rage flashing in his eyes. "This wasn't the deal." The man's voice was calm. "It was always the deal." James squeezed John's wrist harder. "Don't waste it," he said. "Promise me." John shook his head violently. "No, I won't promise anything like this." James smiled, small and tired. "You always were stubborn." His breathing grew shallow. John leaned closer, his voice breaking. "James, please. We'll find another way." "There is no other way," James replied. "That's why I chose it." John's sob turned into a cry. "Why you? Why not me?" "Because you still believe life can be better," James said. "And because Cynthia needs you." At the mention of her name, John froze. "And the children," James added. "They need a future." James pulled John even closer, using the last of his strength. "Swear to me," he said. "Swear that as long as you live, Cynthia and my children will never suffer. Swear you'll protect them like they're your own." John's face twisted in agony. "I swear," he said desperately. "I swear on everything." James exhaled slowly. His grip loosened. "Don't forget," he whispered. Then his hand fell. John screamed. Hunger had been the language of their childhood. James remembered nights when they split one piece of bread and pretended they were full. John remembered mornings when James would lie and say he wasn't hungry, pushing the last bite toward him. Cynthia had entered their lives quietly, marrying James without expectations. She learned quickly that love sometimes meant eating less so children could eat more. She never complained, never accused. She only endured. The day James died, John returned home alone. Cynthia knew before he spoke. She looked at his face and slowly sank onto the wooden bench, one hand flying to her mouth. The children stared, confused, waiting for their father to step in behind their uncle. He promised he'd be back," she whispered. John dropped to his knees. "He saved me." Her cry shattered the room. John didn't sleep that night. James's voice followed him into the dark, repeating the vow over and over. "Protect them. Don't forget." The wealth came fast, almost violently. Opportunities opened. People who once ignored him now smiled. The same hands that pushed him aside reached out in greeting. John built businesses, bought land, wore clothes he never imagined touching. And through it all, he kept his promise. Cynthia and the children moved into a better house. Food was plentiful. School fees were paid early. For a while, John felt James's presence approving, quiet, proud. Then Jessica entered his life. She admired his success, his rise, his ambition. She didn't ask about his past much, and when she did, she smiled politely, like it was something best left buried. After their wedding, she noticed things. "How long will your brother's family stay so close?" she asked one evening. John hesitated. "As long as they need." Jessica tilted her head. "You're a good man," she said, but something in her tone was sharp. "Too good sometimes." John laughed it off. "James died for me." She went quiet. "Later," she said softly, "the dead don't need repayment. The living do." The words stayed. Little by little, things changed. The visits became less frequent. The warmth cooled. When Cynthia asked for help, John found himself sighing first. One night, he lay awake beside Jessica, staring at the ceiling. "Do you ever think you're holding yourself back?" she asked casually. John didn't answer. James's voice echoed in the silence. "Don't forget." John began noticing the shift before he admitted it to himself. Cynthia spoke less when he visited. She smiled, but it no longer reached her eyes. The children grew quieter too, watching him carefully, like they were afraid of saying the wrong thing might make him disappear again. One afternoon, Cynthia finally spoke. "John," she said gently as she handed him a cup of water, "have I done something to offend you?" He frowned. "Why would you ask that?" "You don't come around much anymore," she replied. "And when you do, you seem far away." John looked at the floor. "I've been busy." She nodded slowly. "I know. I just wanted to be sure." Her restraint made the guilt sharper. James would have laughed loudly, complained openly. Cynthia absorbed pain silently, and that somehow made it worse. That night, Jessica noticed his mood. "You look troubled," she said, adjusting the pillows. "Still thinking about them?" John stiffened. "They're my family." She sighed. "They were your family through James. And James is gone." John sat up. "He died for me." Jessica's eyes hardened. "And how long will you live like you owe your life to a ghost?" That word, ghost, made something snap. "He wasn't a ghost," John said sharply. "He was my brother." Jessica raised her hands. "I'm not attacking him. I'm protecting us." "From what?" "From being drained," she replied. "From living in the shadow of someone else's sacrifice." John didn't respond, but her words sank deep. The next time Cynthia asked for help, it was about school fees. Her voice trembled slightly as she explained, clearly embarrassed. John hesitated. "I'll see what I can do," he said. She smiled faintly. "Thank you." Jessica heard about it later. "You said you'd see what you can do," she repeated. "John, that's how it starts. Little requests that never end." "They're children," he replied. "And you're not their father," she shot back. "Where does it stop?" John rubbed his temples. "James made me promise." Jessica folded her arms. "James made you promise while dying. You were emotional. Desperate." "That promise saved my soul," John said quietly. Jessica leaned closer. "Or maybe it's chaining you." The next weeks were harder. Business pressures increased. People demanded more from him. Investors, employees, relatives he barely remembered, all with open hands. Each request made Jessica's voice louder in his head. "You can't save everyone. You're not responsible for everyone." When Cynthia asked again, John snapped. "Do you think I'm made of money?" he asked harshly. She flinched. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean." He stood up abruptly. "You always need something." Her eyes filled with tears. "I try not to ask." The room fell silent. The children stared at the floor. John felt sick, but he didn't apologize. That night, he dreamed of James standing at the edge of a dark road, watching him walk away without turning back. The breaking point came weeks later. Cynthia arrived unexpectedly, holding one of the children whose face was pale with fever. "I just need help for medicine," she said, voice shaking. I didn't know who else to ask. Jessica stepped forward before John could speak. "You should learn to plan better," she said coldly. "John is not your husband." Cynthia froze. "I know that." "Then act like it," Jessica replied. "You're embarrassing him." John opened his mouth. James's face flashed in his mind. Then he closed it. "Maybe you should go," he said quietly. Cynthia looked at him, disbelief flooding her face. "John. James." "James is gone," he said firmly. "And I have my own life now." The words hung heavy in the air. The child whimpered softly. Cynthia's shoulders slumped. She nodded once, pride forcing her spine straight. "I understand," she said. She turned and walked out. That night, the house felt colder. John poured himself a drink, hands shaking. Jessica watched him carefully. "You did the right thing," she said. He didn't answer. Days passed. Then weeks. Cynthia didn't return. John tried to convince himself it was for the best. That boundaries were necessary. That he couldn't carry the weight of his brother forever. But the dreams returned, worse than before. James stood closer now. His eyes weren't angry. They were disappointed. One evening, John saw Cynthia by chance at a market. She looked thinner, older. The children clung to her quietly. Their eyes met. She didn't wave. John turned away first. And somewhere deep inside him, something vital cracked. Time moved forward, but John felt stuck. His wealth multiplied. New contracts came in. His name carried weight now. People greeted him with respect, sometimes fear. Yet the more he gained, the more restless he became. Jessica noticed. "You're never present," she said one night, irritation slipping through her polished tone. "Even when you're here, you're somewhere else." "I'm tired," John replied. "You're guilty," she corrected. "And guilt is dangerous. It makes people weak." John looked at her sharply. "Is that what you think of me?" She softened her voice. "I think you're kind. Too kind. And the world punishes men like that." He said nothing. The news came months later, quietly. A former neighbor mentioned it casually. Cynthia moved. Couldn't keep the place after she fell sick. John's heart stuttered. "Sick?" The man shrugged. "That's what I heard. Stress, maybe. Life isn't easy." John drove home in silence, hands clenched tight around the steering wheel. That night, he barely slept. The next morning, he went looking for her. It took hours, asking questions, following vague directions. When he finally found the place, it was smaller than he expected. Darker. The walls looked tired. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. The door opened slowly. Cynthia stood there, thinner than before. Her eyes widened in surprise. "John." He swallowed. I came to see you." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." The room smelled faintly of medicine. One of the children lay on a mat, coughing softly. John's chest tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" She gave a tired smile. "You made it clear where you stood." "I didn't mean." "You did," she said gently. "And that's okay. I've learned not to rely on promises anymore." The words cut deeper than anger ever could. "I failed you," John whispered. She shook her head. "No. You forgot." He looked at her, confused. "You forgot who you were before the money," she continued. "Before fear crept in." Tears burned his eyes. "James." Her face softened at the name. "James believed in you. He believed you'd always choose what was right, even when it was hard." John fell to his knees. "I broke my vow," he said, voice breaking. "I let her change me." Cynthia knelt too, placing a hand on his shoulder. "James didn't die so you could punish yourself forever. He died so you could live." "But I'm not living," John said. "I'm surviving. And hurting people along the way." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone. "Let me help now. Please." She looked at the children, then back at him. "Help because it's right. Not because you're afraid." "I promise," he said. "No more fear." He meant it. But the real test was still waiting. When Jessica found out where he'd gone, her reaction was immediate. "You went behind my back," she demanded. "They needed me," John replied calmly. "They always need you," she snapped. "And you let them." John met her gaze. "I let my brother die for me. The least I can do is honor him." Jessica's voice dropped, cold and sharp. "If you keep choosing them, you're choosing against me." Silence stretched between them. John's heart pounded. He remembered the vow. The street. James's labored breathing. His last words. Take care of them. I'm choosing myself, John said finally. The man I promised to be. Jessica laughed, but there was no humor in it. Then don't expect me to stay. If staying means becoming someone I hate, John replied, then maybe you shouldn't. She stared at him, stunned. You're serious? Yes. She packed her things that night. As the door closed behind her, the house echoed with emptiness. But for the first time in years, John felt a strange sense of peace. Weeks later, Cynthia's health improved. The children laughed more. John visited often, not as a savior, but as family. One evening, as they sat together, Cynthia spoke softly. James would be proud of you. John looked up at the sky, eyes wet. I hope so. And somewhere deep inside, the weight finally began to lift. John thought the hardest part was over. He was wrong. Doing the right thing didn't bring instant peace. It brought consequences. Jessica didn't just leave quietly. She took half the company contracts with her influence, poisoned relationships, whispered stories that painted John as unstable and sentimental. Investors began asking questions. Partners pulled back. You're throwing everything away for people who can't give you anything back, one associate warned. John listened without arguing. For the first time in his life, he wasn't making decisions out of fear. When business pressure mounted, he simplified. He sold what he didn't need. He stepped away from deals that demanded he become someone else. Money slowed, but it didn't vanish. Character, he learned, was more durable than profit. One evening, Cynthia noticed the changes. You've lost weight, she said as she served dinner. He smiled faintly. I think I'm finally breathing properly. She studied him for a moment. James used to say that wealth should make life lighter, not heavier. John laughed softly. He always knew. The children ran in, arguing over homework, laughing freely. John watched them, something warm settling in his chest. Weeks later, a letter arrived. It was from Jessica. No apology. No warmth. Just a simple line at the end. I hope one day you realize what you lost. John folded the letter slowly and placed it in a drawer. He already knew. He had lost comfort. He had lost illusion. He had lost a life built on fear. And in return, he had gained something far rarer. Peace. Months passed. John set up a trust for the children's education, but quietly. No announcements. No praise. Cynthia didn't protest, because she saw it wasn't charity, it was responsibility. One night, sitting outside under a quiet sky, Cynthia finally asked the question she had avoided for years. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Regret what? Letting James go that day. John's throat tightened. He stared at the stars. Every day, he said honestly. But I regret even more the days I almost let his sacrifice mean nothing. She nodded. Love is strange. Sometimes it saves us. Sometimes it tests us until we're unrecognizable. And sometimes, John added, it demands everything. Silence settled between them, not awkward, but heavy with shared memory. That night, John dreamed of James again. This time, his brother wasn't standing in shadow. He was smiling. When John woke, tears streamed down his face, but they weren't bitter. They were grateful. Years later, people would talk about John's success, about how he rebuilt his empire differently, about how he treated people with an uncommon sense of honor. But they wouldn't know the real story. They wouldn't know that everything he became was shaped by a promise whispered in poverty, and nearly destroyed by wealth. They wouldn't know that a man once lost himself chasing success, only to find himself again by keeping a vow no one was watching him keep. And maybe that's the point. Because the truest tests of character don't happen on stages or in boardrooms. They happen in moments when no one is clapping, when no one is recording, when the only witness is your conscience. If this story moved you, take a moment to like this video. It helps more stories like this reach people who need them. If you've ever struggled between loyalty and comfort, leave a comment below. Your voice matters here. And if you want more powerful stories about sacrifice, betrayal, and redemption, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because the next story might not just entertain you, it might remind you who you're meant to be.